Welcome to the Vinnie Mark podcast. During this two-part episode, I chat to Paul Mabray, the CEO of Emmetry, a company that claims to transform the way wine retailers leverage data. Now, Paul is obsessed with wine online. His entire career has been about wine e-commerce, and in his own words, he once set himself the goal of becoming the digital modern Darby. But while Paul's job may see him staring at a screen for large parts of his day, his philosophy has always been that before you can become an effective digital marketer, you have to first value the human connection. Now, Paul has the uncanny ability to talk about complex data and effortlessly apply it to the simplest of circumstances, which leaves you perpetually wondering, why didn't I think of that? In part one, Paul talks about customer relationship management, why social media is more honest than customer surveys, and what on earth one should do with the data once you've actually collected it. He also touches on the Privacy of Personal Information Act, the usefulness of wine apps, and gives solid advice on how to go about eating an elephant. Paul, thank you so much for being willing to talk to me today. I thought before we start, I just want us to acknowledge that the tech world loves jargon, right?
Yeah.
Usually the people who they're the ones who need the most help in navigating the world of e-commerce and even digital marketing. Those are the ones who know the least jargon. So if you'll come with me, Paul, today our aim is to remove any of the little TLAs or obscure splunking metaphors and really try and unpack what customer-centered marketing is in as simple a way as possible. But before we talk shop, I want you to fill us in a little bit on your journey from mere human, where you started out with the rest of us, all the way over to, sort of wine-focused, data-crunching ninja marketing specialist. I mean, where did your journey begin?
Yeah, in the oddest of places, I actually started as a sales rep in LA, dragging a bag through the streets and selling. And I was a terrible, terrible, terrible salesman, but I did write my own CRM program, so it would tell me who to call, when to call them, what the kids' names were, what they liked, and my sales had incredible growth because I was paying attention to the accounts.
So straight up CRM, can you just unpack that?
Yeah, I blew it right out of the gate, didn't I? CRM. CRM is customer relationship management. So essentially, it was a database or a spreadsheet, if you want to put it in simplest terms. It told me about the customers.
And so, what was in the bag?
You mean what was in the CRM itself?
No. In the bag that you were trying to sell.
Oh, it was called Napa Ale Works. It was a microbrew beer from Napa. And then I went on to sell Kneebom Coppola wines. So
you have been a beverage enthusiast from the beginning, because I mean, you've been involved with wine e-commerce, with Wine Shopper and Wine.com, and from there you moved into the kind of social media sphere with Vintank, and then into where you are now at Emmetry.com, which is very much data focused. But it seems like at every step of the way there has been a carefully crafted beverage in there.
Yeah, we all need a good beverage, my friend. No, the reality of it is even before that, it was always, technology. So at Kneebom Coppola, we built the first ever wine club processing tool. And as you heard, my first job, I built a CRM tool. I fell in love with beverage for a lot of different reasons. I went to college to be a film student and write movies and direct movies. But in the beverage community, I had a great expense account. It was a really romantic industry. And very quickly, I fell in love, not necessarily with the beverage itself, but it's one of the few markets that hadn't been changed in a long time. There wasn't a lot of radical change agents. And I started out of hubris in the beginning, my friend, trying to be the next Mondavi, but doing it digitally. And now I do it out of the love for the industry and making sure it's sustainable and continues to evolve into the right place.
And I guess you state that up front. I mean, as a hopeful wine online retailer, right, I visit your website at emmetry.io, and I'm greeted by the banner that says, "We are transforming the way wine brands leverage data." And it's this massive, bold font, and it sounds simple enough. But then as I start to read it, all these questions start to pop into my mind, right? So for starters, what on earth is data leveraging?
So, data needs to be leveraged to give answers. I mean, data in aggregate is noise. Data is really a roadmap to doing smarter decisions. And it's not always right. There's got places. There's the market that plays into different categories. But if you don't leverage data and use those leveraged answers to make, smarter business, you're really just guessing.
So if you're transforming it, what have people been doing up until now? I mean, before Emmetry came along, what were the mistakes that people were making with the data that they were collecting?
Well, most of them weren't collecting it, to be really honest with you. And then when they were collecting it, they weren't analyzing it properly. They were doing it, in aggregate, or they were doing it with dirty data. So there's a lot of hygiene. There's a lot of using modern data science to really say, if you call this person today, the machine says that you're likely to make a sale.
Right. So dirty data would be where information is incorrect.
That's right. Incorrect or not properly organized, or stale and old because you're not cleaning it over time.
So speaking of data being true or false, you've made an observation that social media provides seemingly very honest data. And I'm just, you can quote Malcolm Gladwell on various platforms where he talks about how poorly a customer's ability is to predict their own choices in the future, or even tell you what they want. He's got that amazing story about how if you ask anyone what coffee they want, they always say rich, dark, strong. But if you look at what coffee people order, it's weak and milky for the most part. So I was wondering, how do you see the potential in social media to provide data that is truer? I mean, if we want clean data, how does social media provide that in a way that, I don't know, old school traditional focus groups wouldn't?
So there's always a cognitive dissonance that occurs when people are asked questions, and oftentimes answer bias or question bias leads us into wrong directions, meaning that when I ask a question, I kind of have an intent of an answer, or when I answer a question, I am trying to answer it based upon what I think you want to hear, or what I'm embarrassed not to say, or what I think I want versus what I really do. So that's the flaw with, survey data, the reality of it is that social media data actually measures the behaviors and the way that you engage with products and people, and actually sees your actual behaviors. The same thing is true for wine apps that use scanning. That scan behavior is what people are really looking at, and you're doing it as an innocuous observer on their shoulder to say, oh, wow, I see that you're engaging a lot with a yogurt brand online, and you talk about video games, and you just told me 3 times that you drank a red wine. That's a pretty clear indicator of what they've done and how they're behaving, versus when you ask them a question, what kind of wine do you like? What are your hobbies? And do you like yogurt or not, right? They may have different answers associated with that versus what they're doing.
So, I mean, in that example that you just gave, if you've got someone who eats lots of yogurt and just drank 3 red wines, is the immediate conclusion, therefore, that if you want to reach wine drinkers, you should also target yogurt lovers? What do you do with that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of answers. That's a great question, by the way. So first of all, you have to put it in aggregate and start to look at clusters. And if you're seeing lots of people that drink red wine and like yogurt, then you can start to make assumptions, right? A single anecdote does not give you that answer. It just tells you about that one single person, and sure. So you're not able to. So in the single person situation, you're able to, next time they come to the winery, offer them yogurt with the 3 red wines. I know this example's a little,
it's a bit of a weird,
a bit of a weird example, but let's just keep rolling with it since we're already here. And then if you find an aggregate, you can say, look, we want to put bottles of wine with Dannon yogurt dishes or Dannon in our advertising. And then whenever anyone's looking, that likes Dannon online, we also want to target them with our social media advertising. If they like Dannon wine, we want to target them with our red wine. So it makes your ad efficacy at a 500% return.
Okay, but so if we take a step out, because I guess what you're talking about is you're really wanting to understand people, and you're wanting to tap into what they are already enjoying. So if I track your thoughts, it's like social media is really talking about what people really do. And you as a marketer then go, I'm not going to give them what I think they want or what I think is nice, but I'm going to actually tap into where they are.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
And this is what I picked up just about you personally, is that if I, as I was preparing for this piece and just looking at some of the things you put on social media, it's very clear that you aren't someone who takes yourself too seriously or is trying to put forward a hugely polished image. And it feels like you really value the realness of the human connection. But then at the same time, as we've just been discussing for the last 5 minutes, you are also this hardcore high priest of data that believes that numbers tell the whole truth. And can you spend a little bit of time telling me about how your personal philosophy marries the idea of the human being important, but also this data being the key to unlocking wealth or growth in business?
So at the end of the day, everything is about human relationships. We buy as humans, we consume as humans, we are humans, and we're different, but we do cluster together and have similar behaviors. And we like to see things that appeal to us. And data is a roadmap to help us find our path to that human, is really what I look at. It's the map to the humans and maps to groups of humans, because it's impossible to scale everything at individual levels, right? At least currently. You can get pretty close, but for a small business, that's very hard. So I really do believe that we should be looking at customers-centric strategies, that they should be the front of the line, and how we think and we talk to them should be in real human ways, and make it easier for them. Nothing's worse than a phone tree. If you've ever tried to call into a 1-800 number and you spend 5 minutes going through the phone tree and then they ask you the same 5 questions after they answer the phone, right? That's not a real human experience. That's creating friction for whatever reason.
For sure.
Data is helping you expose things that you already are interested in, know about. So let's give a small example. Back in the day, Amazon first came out with, if you like this, you'll also like this. And everyone freaked out, right? I don't know if you remember that day. They were like, oh my God, they're looking at my shopping history. I can't believe it. They're spying on me. Right now, they use those algorithms very smartly to tell you, hey, if you like history books, here are 3 books you might like, because a lot of people that like history books like this book, right? And help you discover new things that you may not have known about. But that's really important, because when I go on Amazon, the last thing I want to see is maybe possibly a romance novel. That's not really my genre, right? So they're just helping you, and they're making that roadmap a better human experience for exposing you to something you're probably already interested in.
No, I just find it interesting that you're talking about basically Amazon, for example, using that data in order to try and create the customer experience, or to reduce friction in the customer experience. Weirdly, and that sentiment seems to be growing, what happens is that the use of that data is seen as an invasion of privacy. And in South Africa, especially, there's the Privacy of Personal Information Act. I know it's a global thing, but it's coming into play now. How is that affecting the sort of work that you're looking to do? Gathering data in order to make a customer's experience more frictionless, but at the same time, essentially, you're also invading their privacy, as some people might see it.
So, look, this is a very challenging topic in general, because people speak out of both sides of their mouths, including the marketers. Look, I value privacy like everybody. I think it's important, it's key, and I think that fundamentally, the abuse of data and the abuse of using ways to manipulate behavior has been completely exposed through, whether it's the Cambridge Analytica campaign in the United States, or Brexit, or other malicious campaigns that have been used in ways, the Russian meddling in our election currently, right? Where they're using memes and stirring up racial division and presenting disinformation. There's lots of bad ways to use that macro data, and the backlash that's coming around privacy is really kind of tied to those malfeasant exercises. At the same time, we want people when we give a brand permission, we want them to know more about us. We want them to give us a better experience. So while we say this privacy thing, at the same time, we do want them to understand who we are and not send us emails at the wrong time of day, or not send us too many emails if we don't like it or not opening it up, or only send us running shoes if we're in the running shoes versus yoga shoes, if that's a thing. So this dichotomy of needs exists with all of us, and the reality is we need to find a way to make balance of that and get the customer's permission to at least collect the data that's relevant to helping them out. Certain platforms will be able to collect more data, things like search engines or mass market retailers like Amazon. Others, like wine apps or wine pieces, will be able to create specific data. But we have to understand that, look, the price for free tools is the exchange of data. When you're publishing something on Twitter, you're getting a free tool to use. There is a data exchange going on. Otherwise, it's what does the free give you, right? Or, in advertising, they want to serve you better advertising at Google. Yes, you're giving up things in that piece so that they can do a better job serving the ads that are going to work for you. Otherwise, you'd have to pay for a search engine. What is it, $10 a month, $20 a month? What's the floor?
Well, and I suppose, I guess that's what you're talking about is getting users to see the benefit of submitting data. If I think about my personal journey into wine, it was kickstarted by the way Vivino gamified drinking wine for me. So I would spend, and still do spend, a large amount of my personal time submitting information into Vivino because I feel like I'm part of a community. I'm adding value. Now, you guys have done some pretty exciting work into Vivino, and I see this against the backdrop of getting people to engage with wine. Can you tell us about some of the insights you've seen in looking at Vivino as an app? It's quite big here in South Africa amongst passionate wine users. But the question I always ask in the back of my mind is, how deep has it penetrated into the casual wine drinker's consciousness, if at all?
Yeah, so look, Heine is a friend of mine, and I'm going to speak not just about Vivino, but all wine apps in a macro term. That includes, all of them that we've looked at and analyzed, and we've dug into the majority of the market. I think that we don't really fully understand the customer needs. So Vivino and Delectable and those apps came out with, hey, people want to remember the wine that they tasted, and they want to write a review about it and keep that as a journaling app. And that's somewhat true a little bit, but I think that the real user behavior is trying to make a good decision about wine and finding wines that they were looking at. So, I think that what we found in analyzing all of the data sets is that the majority of users that use those apps are, low weight, low engagement, which means a couple of things. It means that, consumers, the way they care about wine at the low consumption level is more about a beverage, right? A quaffable alcohol delivery mechanism. And the more you go up the high end and more you, lean into more esoteric wines, the more it's about the drinking of the wine and the understanding of the wine, right? And we also know that most of those tools are used to scan a label at point of purchase to decide, is this a wine that's worth buying, or am I going to like it, or is it the right price? So helping them find what they're looking for.
So, you make a point where I think the point exists that you need huge amounts of data in order to draw real conclusions about behavior, right? You're saying
Absolutely.
you can't take one anecdote and assume that to be true. I think in South Africa, especially, a lot of the South African wine producers are quite small, and so their access to data is always small. And it feels like there's this sentiment that using or leveraging data meaningfully can only happen when you are this giant conglomerate or have access to millions of data points. What would you say to smaller producers who are wanting to leverage data but feel like their own customer base just cannot come close to providing what the sort of insights that they would need?
Well, look, it's how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? Is the old adage. The reality is, even a small data set has value, and you start small and you build on that, and you're building processes to understand the customer. And so you're segmenting your small database to say, who's most valuable to me, who's second most valuable, who's third, and how do I create a way to take care of them, the human aspect of it, right? How do I make a better experience for them? How do I make a better contact for them? And I think that that's where wineries need to understand is, we can't leapfrog the process. We have to crawl, walk, run. And crawling, if you have a little amount of data, is, just starting and basically analyzing at a high frequency, whatever that means, once a week, once a month, once a quarter, whatever that your resources can allow, but then giving you a good direction to do something with that. Maybe I'm going to send a birthday card to my best 5 customers. Maybe I'm going to pick up the phone and call them and thank them. And whenever I see a customer spend over $10,000, I'm going to put them in a special customer journey that rewards them as a result of that unusual spend, right? So that I can keep them satisfied and then spend the next $10,000 with me as well.
Right. And so you just kind of slipped it in there, but the assumption in there is that, once again, as a wine producer, you are asking yourself the question, who are my best customers? Right. And you're paying attention to the people, not just the product. And right. I enjoy the term you use on one of your articles at Emmetry, one of your blog posts about blob marketing. Now, you and your team seem to hate blob marketing. Can you tell us a little bit about, I mean, it touches on what you just mentioned, but can you explain what blob marketing is and why it's so unhelpful?
Yeah, the wine industry is fairly nascent in understanding direct-to-consumer marketing or digital marketing. And we tend to use a very, wide brush shotgun approach to it. And so what I mean by that is we send an email to all of our people on our email list, and, or we, send a Facebook ad to everybody. We don't narrow it down to smaller bite-sized pieces that are able to be delivered with better results. And that's what blob marketing is. You're just blobbing it out you're sending it to everybody. And I fundamentally believe that every customer is important, but not every customer has the same importance, right? So by putting them into smaller buckets, generally based upon their purchasing behavior, we can reward them accordingly. And also as a result of that value exchange and caring about the human being and the customer and their impact on our business, have them return the favor by buying more from us.
Right. So the more they spend, the more you engage with them. That can sound quite transactional. I mean, is there a way to get around that?
Well, I didn't say necessarily more exchange, but I mean exchange differently with them. So you know what? Like, let me give you a small example. Let's say we have 100 customers, right? And 10 of them are our best customers, and 40 are our medium customers, and 50 are our casual customers. So we may send a thank you email to the 50 saying, we really appreciate your business. Thanks so much. And for the 40, we may send, a card in the mail. We really appreciate it. And for the top 10, you may pick up the phone and say, I really appreciate you buying from us. You're still saying thank you. You're not.
Sure.
Every customer is important. You're just giving a different importance and a different customer experience based upon the value they are to your business. That's not transactional. That's just basic gratitude, to be really honest with you, and basic understanding of the way people have contributed to your company. It's not saying, if you don't do this, I'm not going to do something with you. You're still engaging with the bottom tier customer by sending them a thank you and, extending your gratitude for their business. You're just doing it differently.
You've reached the end of part 1 of the episode, How to Use Data to Develop Customer-Centered Strategies, part of the ViniMark podcast series. Be sure to join me for part 2 of my conversation with digital marketing specialist and Emmetry CEO Paul Mabray, where we'll continue to discuss data insights and the future of South African wine online.